Hi, you're listening to Avril Sauter talking about CCNA Wireless. In this lesson, we want to focus in on the wireless LAN controller and how to configure advanced features on your lightweight access points. Now, when we talk about Cisco Wireless LAN controller, we're talking about controlling and configuring lightweight access points. So before we start, I just want to do a quick review of how you add and configure lightweight access points to a wireless LAN controller. Now, when the access point first powers on and loads this image, it's going to go through a series of discovery modes to find one or more wireless LAN controllers. And exactly how it does that depends on how the access point is configured. It depends on how the wireless LAN controller is configured, and it also may vary depending on whether it's going to use a DHCP or a DNS server. So for instance, if the access point is configured with an LWAP image, then the discovery process is going to go through is to use LWAP discovery messages. And then if it can't find an LWAP controller, then it will start the CAPWAP messages. Whereas if the access point has a CAPWAP image, then it's going to begin the CAPWAP discovery process. But there's also other methods that the access point can use, and you have to determine which ones you want to have in your network. So one of them, for instance, is the over-the-air provisioning, the OTAP mode, and this is where an access point would listen to other access points, and they're listening for transmissions from those access points that give them the IP address of the wireless LAN controller. And once they've got that, then they can do a direct packet discovery request. I personally don't like OTAP because I don't think it's a good use of RF resources, and I'm also a little bit concerned about security weaknesses in broadcasting the controller IP address over the air. Another way is that you actually go ahead and put the controller's IP address in the access point itself, so it's locally stored. Some people call this AP priming, so they configure it ahead of installation. I personally like this approach in a small deployment. I just find it perhaps easy to get up and running, especially if the access points are being put in a difficult location where it can be hard to get to them should there be a problem. The other ones is to use DHCP, and you can configure option 43 so that it actually finds the wireless LAN controller IP address, and that would be the management IP address. And you can also go through your domain name server, your DNS, and there it will respond to a Cisco LWAP controller or a Cisco CAPWAP controller DNS lookup. And of course, to do the DNS server lookup, it first needs to find the DHCP server. So if you don't have a DHCP server on your network, then you should manually set the DNS server address in the access point. So regardless of which approach, and again the good thing is that the access point will try all of these, eventually it'll have a list of wireless LAN controllers that it can connect to, and at that point in time it'll send a join request. So the access point now has potentially one or more wireless LAN controllers that it can connect to. Now, which one does it choose? Well, if it's been primed, then it needs to choose the address that it was primed with. And so if it was primed with a primary, a secondary, and a tertiary, it'll literally try the first one. If that doesn't work, try the second one, try the third. If that doesn't work, then what it's going to do is it's going to look for the one that's the master controller. And we'll talk about setting up a master controller in a mobility domain in a moment. And then if it can't find a master controller, then it will look for the controller that's least loaded. And how does it know it's least loaded? In the wireless LAN controller's response back to the access point, in response to a discovery request, the discovery response includes the percentage of capacity that's currently being used on that wireless LAN controller, and the access point can choose the controller that's least loaded, and so it can try that one, etc., until finally it can go ahead and join a access point. Once it's joined an access point, then it is associated with that wireless LAN controller. And you can see it by going into Monitor and then the access point summary and all APs. Now once it's joined, what's going to happen is if the code version on the access point is different from that on the wireless LAN controller, the access point will either download to the version that's on the wireless LAN controller, or it'll begin to download the code from the wireless LAN controller. And then once that download is finished, then the AP will execute against that new download and reboot itself. And then, believe it or not, it will restart with that new image, the discovery and join phase. But of course, it'll be a lot quicker this second time because it's actually now primed with the IP address of the wireless LAN controller that it wants to connect to. So it doesn't need to do the discovery process again. So now my access point's up, I can go ahead and configure it. And if I want to see what access points are up, there's two ways I can do it. I can click on the wireless tab, and then under all access points it'll display a list of access points, or I can go through Monitor, come down, look at my AP summary, and where it says all APs I can just click Detail. Then it will bring me to the screen that you see here on the right. And I'll have a list of access points. Now if I have tens and hundreds of access points, then what I'd want to do is I'd have to select the filter. And then I can filter out what access points I want to look at. Here I've just got two, so I can just click on the hyperlink underneath the AP name of the AP that I want to go in and configure. Once I go in and look at that, I have some configuration tabs: General, Credentials, Interfaces, High Availability, Inventory, Advanced. So let's now take a look at those. So I thought you might find it valuable to actually take a look at those different access point configuration options on a wireless LAN controller, and we can just talk through where the options are and how you would use them. So I've come in to my wireless LAN controller and I'm at my Monitor tab. As I said, you can go in through Monitor or through Wireless to find the access points. Here I'm just going to come down here where it says All AP and click Detail. Here's the filter if I want to change the filter and help myself find an access point, and here are the two access points that I currently have connected. I can click on one of these, and here you can see the tabs: General, Credentials, Interfaces, High Availability, Inventory, and Advanced. So in the General tab, you can notice here I can give the access point a name. I can change its location. So I can say this is located in the cafeteria, in the engineering building, floor 1, etc. Here's where I can disable or enable the access point. Very important to know that. But look what's here as well is the IP mode. So when I've brought up an access point, maybe I want this to operate in a monitor mode or a bridge mode, and this is where I can come in and change that configuration option. If I'm doing wireless intrusion prevention, then the sub mode would be relevant, and this tells me the operational status, whether it's registered or deregistered. Here's the port number. Now over here you can see the versions. So the primary software version, the version of the backup software on this access point, the pre-download status, the version of the software that's being pre-downloaded, the time duration, if it was set for me to then do another download, and the number of times that the access point has tried to do a pre-download. So it's telling me everything I need to know about the version that's running on this access point and its attempts to actually come into sync with my wireless LAN. Here's the IP address that's been given to the access point, and here's some statistics on it as well. And here's the ability for me to reset it to the factory defaults. So let's now look at another tab here, the credentials. Now this gives me the ability to set in login credentials. If I click this, you'll see it will come up and request me the login credentials, and I can set up a unique username and password for this specific access point. I don't want to do that. And here's where I can set up the 802.1x credentials, again specifically for this access point, and that will prevent it inheriting them from the controller. Now in this case I want them to inherit them from the controller, so I'm just going to deselect those, and then we can take a look at the interfaces tab. And you'll see that it's broken into a couple of parts. This one is the Ethernet interfaces, and these are the radio interfaces. On the Ethernet interfaces you can see the operational status here and the number of packets that have been transmitted. Coming down you can see here my radios, my 2.4, my 5 gigahertz radio. You can see they're up, and at the moment my clean air operational status is currently set to down. So next I want to take a look at the high availability tab, and this is where I would set my primary, my secondary and my tertiary controllers for this access point. Now if you had a backup controller that was outside of the mobility group that this access point is currently connected to, then you'd want to go ahead here and set up your primary, secondary and tertiary controller names. And then here you can set up your AP failover priority. Low assigns the access point to level 1 priority. That's the default, you can see. Medium, high and then crucial will bring it up all the way up to level 4. Next we have the inventory tab, and from here you can see it's got the product ID of the access point, the version number, the serial number, etc., the certificate, everything that I need to know should I need to maybe make a service request or something like that. I don't need to get the information from the back of the access point. And over here I have the advanced tab. This one tells me the regulatory domain. You can see here is deployed in the US. It shows me that CDP is turned on. So if I do a CP discovery, it'll be able to find the wireless LAN controller. I could turn that off. This is a drop-down list here that shows me the names of any AP groups, VLANs that I've created, and I haven't created any, so it just shows the default group there. Shows me whether I've set up Telnet and SSH, and here I have some maintenance task where I can actually download and change the image on the access point. Now some of these options will change depending on the mode of the access point, like if I put it into a mesh mode, etc. Some of these details on these tabs will change. I've taken you through how and where you'd find the information on these different tabs. And again, I would recommend you connect your access point to a wireless LAN controller and just change these different options, see what the implications are. And again, If you want to change the mode of your access point, remember here is in the General tab. That's one I think I perhaps changed the most. So to wrap up this lesson, management interface. Remember, this is for my in-band communications. The management interface is the IP address that I actually use when I access the wireless LAN controller web GUI. And you also saw that I use it in mobility management, and I also use it for my DHCP lookup for my access point to be able to find the controller. So it has a lot of uses. The management interface, very important IP address to remember. Thank you for listening.